Sunny day, saplings. Today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks on Ivern that you can use to climb that solo queue ladder. You might be familiar with a few of them, but hopefully some of these will come as a surprise to you and you'll learn something new. Without further ado, let's jump into the client. Okay, so the very first tip and trick that we're going to talk about is you can actually ward while you're putting your friend of the forest on one of the camps. So let's say I'm at the blue buff here and I'm concerned that there's a blitzcrank or somebody over the wall. If I start my passive, I can actually ward over the wall and check if they're there. So that's a pretty easy one, but it is important. Another thing that you can do is while you're recalling, let's say you're trying to get back to base as quickly as possible. Here, let's do it on the Gromp. Let's say you're trying to get back to base as quickly as possible and you don't want to wait for this. While you're recalling, you can actually smite the camp without stopping your recall. So that's something really cool that I like using. It buys you a few seconds and you don't have to wait around before you want to start channeling your recall. Ivern's a low economy jungler, so any little bit of efficiency that you can get and safety, that's going to be really good for Ivern. So the second thing we want to talk about is you can use Ivern's bushes proactively to stop your wards from being disabled. So let's pretend that this is an enemy pink ward right here. There's an enemy pink ward in this bush, okay? If I'm scared there's a bunch of people there, or over here, I can put my ward down, but it's going to be cancelled by this ward, right? But what I can do is, if I put a bush over top of my ward, I'll still get the full vision of the ward. And so you might be asking yourself, how is this helpful? Well, it really helps you when you're talking about different vision for objectives like Dragon. So if I put a ward down here, I get full vision of the pit. Now let's say the enemy puts a pink ward down and it cancels my ward, so I don't have any opportunity to see this pit here. If I put a bush over top of my ward, I will once again be granted full vision of what this ward can see, because the bush acts as a stop to anything outside of the bush. So anything in the bush gets vision separate from anything outside of the bush. Another way that this is useful is if I have a bunch of bushes in the back of here, right? And the enemy is taking the dragon. If I blast cone into the bushes and they don't have vision of the bush, they're not going to see me blast cone into the bush. So these bushes actually stop vision from so here's the enemy here. These bushes cannot be seen by this target dummy. So even if I have, let's say I put my 3 bushes down and they don't have these bushes warded, and I want to come and try and steal the dragon, I can jump into the pit and I can stay in the bush here. They can't see me and I can smite the dragon away and then flash out. Another way you can do this is you can flash smite right away and they won't be able to see you before you smite away that objective. Even if there's only one bush in here, if you flash in that bush and smite it, then you get the objective. So that's a really cool little trick that you can do. The same principles apply when you're actually trying to fight for the dragon. So let's say the enemy team is in mid lane. If what we want to do with our bushes is we want to block off this entire section here. You can either do it like this, or you can do it across over to this point. We want to funnel them into the dragon, but stop them from having vision over here. So what this allows us to do is our tanks will be able to engage out of the bush and they're not going to have vision. So when they walk into the dragon pit and put a ward down in the bush, that's when we pounce and we go and we try and fight them. So that's a really good setup. As you can see, the more bushes you have in conjunction, the more bushes it creates. Ivern's bushes, if you don't know, actually grow if they're close enough to a wall or to another bush. So you can see that principle here. Now I have vision for a sec of this. Now I have vision of where this target dummy is because my bush gives me vision of him. So you can see if I connect bushes together, I get vision of those bushes. So now I can see everything that's in this bush up here. So it gives me safety when I'm trying to take objectives. The other way that it's useful is if we're trying to take this dragon and we have a bunch of our players, while we're taking the dragon, we want to put bushes down here. One, it blocks the enemies from seeing how much health we have, so they're less willing to try to engage on us. And two, they cannot see the dragon, so they don't know how much health the dragon has. So Ivern's bushes are really good in a scenario like this from cutting off the objective from your enemy. So that's the second or third tip that we want to talk about. So another trick with the bushes, when you're trying to take Baron, let's pretend this is Baron, is you want to have two bushes like we talked about covering your team taking Baron, blocking vision of the Baron and blocking vision of your health bars. But for your third bush, generally you have 3 bushes with 40% CDR or 45%. Your third bush you want to put right here. Now what this does is it lets your tank or engage tool, so let's say you have a big Maokai right here. He's ready for when the enemy team walks in here, and then you get a free engage because the enemy's not going to be able to see, right? So let's say I'm Maokai and the enemy comes through. Here's the enemy. From the bush, they can't see me right now, so I can just engage on them right away. So that's really the best setup for bushes when you're trying to set up Baron. Another little tip that I like to do is if I don't have the timers of the enemy's buffs, so let's say the enemy has taken the red buff already or the blue buff, but I'm not aware of it. What you can do is, while you're walking by, just put a bush in the pit and it'll show you that the buff is there. But if the buff isn't there, what it's going to do is it's going to reset your map. So you can see down there on the map, it's going to reset the icon on your map. And so what that allows us to do is right before the buff is about to spawn again, 15 seconds before it's going to spawn again, a little yellow icon is going to pop up where the buff was supposed to be. And that's going to let us prepare to go and steal their buffs. But always use your buffs to give vision. That's basically the point. They give 3 seconds of vision and their range is really, really long. You can see that. I believe it's 1600 units. So I don't have to get very close to check if camps are up. And that'll help me reset the minimap icons and let me invade for the next time the buffs are up. The next little trick that we want to do is taking Gromp over the wall. So if you're red side, pretending that we're red side right now, what we can do is spawn Daisy over the wall by walking up to the wall and pressing the R key. So now Daisy's over the wall, and then we ask Daisy to target the Rift Herald. We put a bush down on ourselves for extra autos, and we can continually shield Daisy from this position. Once the Rift Herald's getting low, we Q it over the wall, and boom, we have a very safe Rift Herald. So that's something that's very easy to do. It's very safe, and the best part is, even if the enemy has taken the crab, for example, the crab, look at the crab vision, the crab doesn't see the Rift Herald being taken on the other side of the pit. So that's another really fun trick that you can use to safely capture an objective with Ivern. The same principle can apply to Gromp. If your team's behind and you need to use all the tips in your toolbook to try and get as much farm as you can actually take Gromp from this side of the wall. So let's say the enemy's invading your blue side and you really don't want to give up your Gromp because you need all the farm you can possibly get. if I have vision of the Gromp here, from right here I can mark the Gromp and I can take it. If the Gromp was back up, you can also smite it from over the wall. So as long as you have vision, you can take it. This also helps you on the other side if you're trying to sneak away camps from the enemies there. So another really cool thing you can do with Ivern, which a lot of people don't know about, is if you're in a bush here. So we're in a bush and we want to take the scuttle, but the enemy's taking it. If we mark the scuttle from inside the bush, the enemy can't see us place down our grove onto the camp, because the enemy technically doesn't have vision of where we are. So the enemy will not see this circle that's around Scuttlebug. And I'll show a quick video right now to really demonstrate this point and how incredibly effective it is.
Don't start fights, Brambleback. Sometimes I need to treat myself. Sometimes I need to treat myself.
The same principle applies where if the enemy's taking the scuttle over here, you can stand in this bush and mark it and then smite it away from them and run away. If you don't have scuttle control, so you can use that trick if you're behind or the enemy is taking the scuttle before you get there. So another trick, if you have Daisy out, you can move Daisy with the R key. And then you can ask Daisy to attack things. So if Daisy is attacking this, I can cancel Daisy's attacks with my R key movement. And then right when we're ready to go in, I can tell her to attack that target again and knock them up. So you can delay her third hit and make sure that you're only stunning the enemies right when you want to. So I can hit this dummy twice and walk around for a little bit. Okay, we're ready to go in. Okay, Daisy, knock them up. And so then that gives us all the control and lets us dictate the terms of the fight, right? So we can use Daisy, once we get good enough at this, we can use Daisy as counter engage. So when they're trying to come into us, then we can use Daisy to knock them up whenever we feel like it's most necessary. And you can do that on anything. You can do that on minions, you can do that on champions. And so it's a really useful tool. Okay, so one of the best things about Ivern is his ability to tower dive effectively. So how do we do that? The easiest way to tower dive with Ivern is to use Daisy. So what you want to do is, let's say you're starting over here in Try and your team is pushing up the wave, pushing up the wave. If the enemy player is underneath the tower here, we want to come all the way behind the tower. So we don't want to be the ones getting into tower range. What we want to do is spawn Daisy to go and attack with a shield, and then we want to put bushes behind the tower to stop their retreat. So now if they're trying to run away, we can stop their retreat and Daisy's the one tanking the tower. This lets Daisy plus your team get the kill because Daisy's going to be knocking up, you're going to stop the retreat path, and it leads to very easy tower dives. So the same principle works over here as well. Daisy's going to go in, Daisy's going to be tower diving, and you're going to block off the retreat. And you can flutter in some autos as well. It works really good on both sides of the map here. Okay, I'm sure you guys have all heard this trick before, but when ganking mid lane, what you want to be doing is you want to be putting a bush right here. So the way that vision in League of Legends works is the enemy mid laner is not going to be able to see anything except for the tips of grass that are popping out through the lane here, because this is going to cut off vision of us. And so a lot of laners are really good at dodging skill shots, but not as good at dodging skill shots they're not expecting. So we're able to stand right here. They don't know that we're coming. Oh, and we can throw out Qs this way, or we can just flank them and they're none the wiser. So that's the best way to gank. If you put a bush down here and gank, that's cool. They might see you, they might work, it might not. But now when you repeat gank, you're going to come back around and you can walk all the way into this bush without them even noticing that you're here. And so it makes for really nice repeat gank patterns, it blocking off vision in the mid lane. And so now you can throw out that Q and do a whole lot of damage. When you're ganking, you always want to be putting bushes down to give yourself the empowered auto attacks. A little tip when you're farming, I would recommend always using your Q to go over walls when you're farming. Let's see if I can do this first try. For example, I can Q the Gromp, I can take the camp, and I can jump over to the Gromp. And you can do nice little combos like that. You can skip through the walls here to just make your farming very easy. You basically want to be swinging through the jungle as if you're George of the Jungle. Want to come through this wall here, of course. You can Q the camp there, take your red, and get right over to the Krugs right away. Really easy. So that's one of the easiest, fastest ways to clear with Ivern. You always build a lot of mana, so it's never really a concern to use your Q effectively going through the jungle for farming. Now, the last tip I want to show you is maybe the one that people are the least familiar with. But Daisy actually has a bug in her code that allows you to hit the inhibitors and the Nexus. So the way that you want to do this is with your R key, you want to hit Control R left click. And it's a little bit buggy, but Daisy will actually attack the inhibitor. You see that here? So it's Control R and right click. And so you can see I don't think it's intentional because there's no sound cue. There's no Daisy attack sound. And so you saw there Daisy actually took the inhibitor. The same thing works for the Nexus. So it's not intentional and it's difficult to do, but I've actually won a few games having Daisy hit the Nexus when our team was just kind of fighting. And the enemy team wasn't ready for it. They didn't expect Daisy to be the one finishing out the game here. So it's just Control R right click. You gotta sometimes do it a couple of times, but you'll see there you have Daisy ending the game for us. So that's all the tips and tricks I have for this video. I hope you learned something. If there's a tip that you missed and you think I should be aware of it, and maybe I could put it in the next video, just let me know. But for now, have a sunny day, saplings. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.
I wonder what the ducks are plotting today.